Hello everyone, my friends. It's Ranger Russ at the Meigs Nature Center, getting ready to do another program. I do have to tell everyone today the park did fill up and we had to close, so I encourage you to visit other parks right now. Getting into Hammonasset is not going to be possible right now, unless you park a long ways away and walk in, which you're not allowed to park on the street, so I don't know how you would get into the park today. But it's a beautiful day here at the park, probably getting close to 80 degrees. Maybe we're up there by now. It doesn't feel that hot to me, but inland you guys are probably feeling it quite a bit warmer. We have a nice cool shore breeze today, so very nice to be at the beach today. Today's program is about tracking. Now, tracking is a big subject, and there are lots of parts and pieces. We're only going to cover a little bit of it because I only want to do like 20 minutes. So we'll cover the basics of tracking. And if you're interested in learning more about tracking, Nature Center where you can go into a lot more detail about tracking. So look into doing a program. You can see all of our programs at Meigs Nature Center. I encourage you to seek out one of our more established, longer days brief program about tracking. Okay, so when you're tracking, the first thing we need to talk about is a track is what? It is a sign that an animal left behind, a sign that an animal was in a location. There are other signs that animals can leave. It's not just tracks. If you think about it, what signs do you think animals would leave behind? What things might you see that would tell you that? One of the big things people think about are parts of food, leftover food or uneaten food, right? So and started eating food on some leaves, or leaving signs behind that were eaten. So you might or grass. You also might find, if it's a predator, a carnivore, you might find bits of fur, some feathers, maybe some blood, something like that that's also left behind. So it's not the prettiest thing, but yes, we find those things left behind by animals. It could also leave feathers and fur from itself if it's shedding or molting. So in the springtime, you tend to find that more often than you do at other times of the year. You also might find an animal marking its territory. So they might many animals rub against trees. Deer in the fall, when they're trying to get the velvet off their antlers, they'll do what's called thrashing the shrubbery or the bushes, where they stick their antlers right in and shake their head around and try and get all that velvet off of their antlers. So there are those signs that can be left behind. What other signs? Oh, the big one that I always leave out. Nobody likes to talk about it, but it's scat. Scat is basically animals poop, and all animals have to do it. Everybody poops, but that's a sign that can be left behind. And if you've seen some of the other programs I've done, we've talked a little bit about the scat left behind. So like an otter, it eats mostly fish. You're going to find fish scales in its scat. A raccoon is going to eat everything, so there's a little bit of everything, but a skunk tends to eat lots of insects and berries, so you'll find lots of seeds and the exoskeletons of the insects. So there are lots of ways that you can tell by the size and what's in the animal's scat. So that's another way that you can identify some things left behind by an animal. All right. There are a few other things that can be left behind, other signs that are left behind by an animal, maybe digging for food, maybe digging for a nest or building a nest in a tree. Those are also signs that an animal was there. Now, once you have found animal tracks, so this is what we're going to focus on, are the animal tracks. Animals leave tracks in some places more easily than others. So if you walked out on your lawn right now and started looking for tracks, do you think you're going to find any? Probably not. The grass makes it really hard to track. So the best places to find tracks is bare ground. That's ground that's not covered by either leaves or grasses or other plants. And the more moisture in the substrate's just another word for whatever's covering the ground or underneath the plants. If it's moist, so wet sand, wet soil or mud, and wet snow are great places to find tracks. Harder ground and really dry ground, not good either. You're not going to find tracks on a log or even on a rock. Those are going to be harder places to track an animal. But soft substrate, that's what you're going to look for. Here at Hammonasset, when the beach is dry, not a lot of tracks. Water, you might see some tracks where the and the waves keep it smooth, which makes the track stand out a little better. But the best place here at Hammonasset to find tracks is in our salt marsh. The big salt pans, those are just muddy, look like a giant mud puddle. Those are great places to find tracks. And I'm going to do part 2 of our salt marsh program, and part of that is looking for tracks in a salt pan. So look for that program coming up. Now, let's say that you found an animal's track, or a set of tracks, because you're usually not just going to see one track, you're going to see a line of tracks. The next step is to look at the whole set of tracks. You don't just look at one right off. Look at the whole set before you get close to them, and you're going to try and look for a pattern in the tracks, because there are 4 different ways that animals walk. I don't know if you knew that. One of the ways that animals walk are the walkers, okay? You're not going to be able to read it because it's reversed. But walkers have a very uniformed pattern the way they walk. So if you imagine there's 4 feet, so the front feet and the back feet. The left front and the right back move at the same time. And then reverse it. The right front and the left back move at the same time. So it's like the front legs and the back legs are just walking along in a nice even pattern. That's the first way that animals move. The second way are the waddlers. I love the waddlers because they look like they're just lumbering along. It's a really cool way to walk. The reason for that is they only move 1 foot at a time. Now they can do this quickly and they can run, and it's a different pattern when they're running, but front legs, back legs are going to move 1 foot, then the other, then another, then another. So that creates this side to side. So the front legs are going like this and the back legs are going like this, and the animal looks like it's going side to side as it walks. Those animals are not very common, but bears, raccoons, those are waddlers, and they look really funny when they're walking. Skunks are another one. The walkers are the most common, coyotes, bobcats. There are lots of deer. Those are all walkers, and they have a different pattern. So the next pattern I'm going to show you, there's the pattern of the waddlers. So you can see the rear foot and the back foot land on the same place as they're walking. And it's not always this consistent either, because they're moving irregularly. And then with the walkers, you get this really nice pattern. No track lands on another one. Okay? So the next set of tracks are the hoppers. So obviously a rabbit is a hopper. And if you look, so with a rabbit, the back foot is this long one and the front foot is the small one. The hoppers, the back track lands in front of the front track. And that's because if you look here, right here, you can see it lands with its front feet, and then its back feet come in front, and then it can rest like that. So its back feet land, the track is in front of the front feet. So that makes hoppers pretty easy to identify. All right, our last group are the bounders. And these are really cool. It's really only the weasels that we have in Connecticut. So that would be otters, mink, short-tail and long-tail weasel. Those are the bounders. So when they hop, they're hopping, they lift front feet first through the air, and then the back feet hit and lift before the front feet. So they usually don't stay in one place. It's the back feet, then the front feet. Only one set of feet are on the ground at any given time. All right? And the track looks very irregular that way. So you can see 2, 2, 2, 3, 2, 1. You get a really irregular pattern with the bounders. Okay. So now that you've looked at the whole set of tracks, you can tell whether it's a walker, a waddler, a hopper, or a bounder. The next thing you want to do is look at the distance between the tracks. If it looks like there's great distance between, that probably means the animal was running. If it looks like there are big depressions, if it's sinking unusually far into the ground, that probably means the animal was jumping. It could also mean that they're running because you get a deeper track when they run. So you want to look at all those things because when we're identifying a track, we're not just trying to identify an animal. I always want to try and identify what the animal was doing. So we can identify, we get it down to a group. Then we can try and tell what it's doing. Looking at the set, we can tell what it was doing. Next, what everybody's waiting for, you get to look specifically at one track and try and distinguish what animal could have left the track. So first off, I'm going to say the size of the track has a lot to do with being able to identify it. And if your track is in snow, fresh snow, it's going to be an accurate track. But if the snow has begun to melt, the track will get larger as the snow melts. The same thing happens in mud. If it's really soft mud and the footprint sinks really deep, the track's going to get a little bit larger. It's going to look bigger than it really is. But the best thing to do is just get a basic track guide. You can use a little fold out. I'll show you one at the end. You can use something like this. This is just something we use, give the kids. It's not a whole lot of tracks, but it's the basic tracks. And you will notice there are some funny ones on here that we don't have in Connecticut. And that's just because I had a little rubber stamp of the track. So the kids get to make their own track stories at the end of this program. And you're going to see a gorilla on here somewhere. So ignore the gorilla. It's not part of this program. But if you look at the tracks, you can see there's going to be distinguishing features. Some of them have very defined fingers. Some of them have solid sort of looking mass without any definition to the fingers. Okay? So you're looking at all of the different types, the different areas of the track. Now, when you look at the track, it's a good idea, too, to know which direction the animal is going. So typically, the pointier ends are the front of a track. Okay? That's the front of the track. That's the direction that the animal was going. When I say front, that's what the animal was going. So if you've got a nice, clean track, that's the best thing you want to do. So when you find that big set, look for one of them that's really in the flattest ground, a nice clean track, and that's where you're going to start your identification process. Now, I've talked about canines. They always leave claw marks. Felines can retract their claws so they don't leave them. Raccoons and skunks have very nice hands, so you get a handprint. Skunks, raccoons, and a few other animals have very different tracks. The front track and the back track look really different. So if you saw them by yourself, you would think it was a different animal. By itself, you would think it was a different animal. But when you see them together, then you're able to recognize it. Okay, I've got a track story right here. I'm going to turn the camera around and bring it a little closer so that we can go through a couple of these track stories, and I'll tell you what this is. So first of all, a track story, you can make one at home if you have some rubber stamps or you want to draw some tracks. But the first thing you have to do is draw your scenery. So let's turn the camera around to show you my track story. A little faint there. It shows up better in real life, but we can do it this way. So this is a stream here, and down here there's a shrub, and there's a hole in the ground, and over here there's a log. There's the opening of the log, and then the log goes there, and there's another hole in the ground with some grass. Okay, so this is our scene where our track stories begin. And we're going to start our track story. Let's start with that top track there. So, the first thing, remember we're going to look at the set of tracks as a whole. And if you look, we've got a very regular pattern with the front track landing occasionally. The next thing we're going to do is look at any signs, other signs that the animal left behind, because that's going to help us identify the track. So this right here, this little brown, that is actually, imagine a hole being dug. Okay? So this animal came in this direction. Here are the pointy bits are pointing this way. So this is the direction the animal we're going. And you can see it dug here, and it dug there. And then it continued along. And it circles over here, gets over there, comes into this little grassy area of the ground. So now you have to see what you know. Let's go through all the things that we know about this set of tracks. The first thing, it is a waddler. The second thing, it digs in the ground. And it doesn't just dig for a home. So it lives in the ground because it went into the hole and there's no tracks coming out. So we're going to guess that it lives there. And it also dug in a couple of places. So that means it's probably digging for food. So can you think of an animal that digs for food and lives in a hole in the ground that is a waddler? There are a couple of animals that come to mind right off. The first one is a woodchuck or a groundhog. Woodchucks and groundhogs have a very wide track. They have a broad track and they like to dig holes in the ground. The other one is the skunk. And skunks have a much narrower track, and they do have that really nice handprint, but a woodchuck also gets the handprint. Woodchucks, though, the front track and the back track are much more similar. And this one has a longer back track. So we can tell that we're looking at the trail of a skunk. Skunks dig grubs and roots from the ground and mushrooms, and they live in a hole in the ground. And since we don't see any tracks coming out of that hole, we're going to give that hole a really wide berth because we don't want to scare the skunk. All right, we have time. We're going to do another set of tracks. Let's look at this set of tracks right here. You can see it goes along. It goes across the stream. And I don't know if you can see, but the tracks on each side of the stream are a little darker than the rest of the tracks. It's not showing up very well on the camera. And the tracks come down here. Okay. And it looks like the tracks, let's do this. The tracks come down, and it looks like they start to follow these very tiny tracks. Okay, they follow the tiny tracks, and then they circle back, continuing to follow the tiny tracks, and then it disappears on the log. Now, when we look at this log, and we look at the size of the track, the animal probably did not go into that log because these are pretty large tracks. You can see that the tracks have a claw, so we can eliminate the felines. They have a regular pattern, so it is a walker. And they have a really pointy, they're very pointed in the front. So quickly we're going to say that because it's so pointy and you can see that claw there, this is probably a canine. And the canines that we have in Connecticut, oh, there's another thing to keep in mind. The area that you're looking at a track is going to help you determine what the animal is. Because chances are you're not going to see the tracks of an elephant or a tiger or an alligator here in Connecticut. So you can eliminate those animals. So the canines that are in Connecticut are fox, coyote, and domestic dogs. We have lots of dogs. Because this track is so large, I'm going to say that we could eliminate the fox right off the bat because fox have pretty small feet. So again, size helps you determine what the track is. Now we can see that it jumped over the stream. So it was able to jump pretty far. So we're going to say it's a coyote. It's a larger animal able to jump the stream pretty easily. It came down and it picked up these really tiny tracks and it circled around. Now see, the tiny tracks are really close together and then they're really far apart. So whatever that small animal was ran back to the log and probably went and hid in the log. There's no signs of an animal being eaten here. So either our coyote caught the animal and left, or it left without catching the animal who went into the log. But it could leave on the log. Remember, you can't track on a very hard surface, so it's not going to be able to track on that log. And I'm going to tell you, we're not going to do the whole track story for this little animal, but this is a mouse. And the mouse comes out of the log down to the stream to get a drink, follows the stream for a little while, probably looking for food, and then realizes there's a coyote coming and runs and hides back in the log, and the coyote moved on. All right, we're going to do one more track story, and we're going to do this one here. So this animal, so it's hard to tell, but this is the front of the track. This is the pointier end here. Okay, here. So this animal comes along. It circles around, goes all the way around this shrub. Okay. Then it continues along, crosses the stream, doesn't jump. There's no darker. So it just steps across the stream, so we know this is a really large animal, and then it left. Animal hoof. Okay, you can see two distinct separate in Connecticut because we get a lot of them. Occasionally we get a moose in Connecticut. It's going to be a deer for wild animals. All right. So this deer came along. Remember, it's going and it circled this shrub completely. So why would it around a shrub? I would say the only really good explanation is that it likes to eat the shrub. If it came along, not an edible shrub to a deer, it may have taken a nibble or taken a smell and said, oh, that doesn't taste good. But if it was a good plant to eat, then the deer would have circled, nibbling all the way around, and then moved down. And again, it could step right across the stream. It doesn't have to jump to get across the stream. Okay, so this is the basics of our track. I'm going to flip the camera back around here and we'll put it back in the holder. Let's see, do we have any questions? Somebody guessed a deer, good job. Someone mentioned scat and feathers. You guys are on it. Very good. You probably said that before I did. All right, so I mentioned it. All you need is a really basic. Peterson has a big book about tracks, and there are tracks all over New England. But if you're just starting out, it's really a good idea to go with something more basic, something like this. So this little pocket naturalist, who even puts this out? I'm not even sure. But this is a great way to do the basics of tracks. You can see the basic tracks there. It's got a little picture of the animals. So here you see the possum has a slightly different front to back. The raccoon has a much more distinct difference. The skunk has a really different front to back. Let's see if they have the woodchuck, because I talked about that one. I don't see the woodchuck. But this is a basic guide, and that's what you really want to have. You want to start out with a basic guide. Here we go. So the woodchuck or the groundhog, the tracks are similar, not really different, but there's a little bit of a difference there. All right. Actually, that's the woodchuck there. And this guide also has some of the other signs animals can leave behind. The chewed on food, scraping on a tree, the nests, bird nests, and some examples of the basic scat that you can get. And really important, a guide for measuring. So this is really a big help when you're doing tracking. It's a good idea to know the exact size of a track. Once you've done it a long time, you can pretty quickly identify and go by the size that works. But this is a good way to tell. Most people starting out and most people trying to identify something in nature really overestimate the size. They think everything is much larger. I always have people telling me, oh, I've got an 8-foot snake. Bring me a snake and it's only 5.5 feet. But I'm going to say a 5.5-foot snake can look like an 8-foot snake when you're not make you jump. When is the best time to find tracks? So because what you're really looking for is moist ground, the best time is after a rain or after a fresh snowfall. Those are going to be the best times that you can find tracks. So it's really about the substrate. If you've got a nice moist substrate. Now, I mentioned fields are or mowed lawns, not a good place to find tracks, but an open natural field, you will see paths. You're not going to be able to see an identifiable track, but you'll be able to see paths through the tall grass. You look at the raccoon, the raccoon program I did with a raccoon in a dumpster. We followed the trail that raccoon had left through the grasses. So you can see all those other programs on YouTube. Go to our Meigs Point Nature Center YouTube channel or visit meigspointnaturecenter.org to see a bit more about tracking. So I hope everyone is continuing to enjoy these programs. I'm building opens. We're going to do the programs. So we'll probably change our schedule, but we'll let that. I would, and it's a great day to be outside, especially today. Get a chance to, you can programs in the evening or watch them anytime you want. Okay. I'm going to sign off for now. We're going to be back tomorrow